Hey, Truth Seekers, welcome back. Zach here. It is Monday, May 11th, 511, a special number in numerology. A year ago today, I did my first radio interview for this work. I went on fakeologist.com, and he asked me if I knew anything about the number 511 or 115. And at the time I didn't, but now I realize that in Jewish gematria, Saturn equals 511, and so much of what's going on in this world is connected to Saturn worship. These headlines this morning are about casting doubt on what happened to Osama bin Laden, the date he was supposedly executed by the U.S. military. And the first question people always need to ask themselves whenever the news presents any story is, why is the media presenting me this story? Why do they want me to have this information? I mean, for more than a decade, we've been given the propaganda about Osama bin Laden, who he is, what he's done, what he's capable of. And throughout the entire spectacle, I've seen right through it, and I don't know how other Americans can. We live in a nation that's so well defended, that spends so much money on military, to think that we could be penetrated by a cave dweller, as he was referred to. It's just insanity. Anyhow, there is a specific reason that this story is coming out today, May 11th, and it has to do with the numerology and the gematria of the characters involved. Seymour Hersh, who is the one who has sparked this story with what he released yesterday, has said that the story of the bin Laden killing is equivalent to a Lewis Carroll fairy tale. And if you don't know who Lewis Carroll is, that's who wrote Alice in Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass. And whenever I think of the title Through the Looking Glass, I think of the television, which is how the lie of bin Laden in September 11th has been told all this time. Through the Looking Glass. The only place in the world that people saw planes fly into the World Trade Centers was on television. Nobody saw that with their own eyes because it did not happen. It only happened through the looking glass, which so many Americans do not understand. And probably so many people watching this video right now are already shocked by. What? Planes didn't hit the building? No, they did not. The whole thing is a lie. So that said, let's get into how this hoax of a story came to be. Let's start with Seymour Hersh. His quote yesterday, "The White House's story might have been written by Lewis Carroll. Would bin Laden, target of a massive international manhunt, really decide that a resort town 40 miles from Islamabad would be the safest place to live and command Al-Qaeda's operations? He was hiding in the open," so America said. Well, I myself have said the same thing since the day the story broke. This guy that they couldn't find was right next to a military base all this time? The truth of that is he's probably a military agent. And that's probably why he was so close to the military base. Everything happening in our news is part of a military psyop. So many of our news anchors went to military school, we don't realize that. People don't get that the TV was invented for mind control, to control the public to a greater extent than it had ever been done before. These things happened before television, it's just that radio and television took it to a whole new level. So, moving on with these details. This is the headline this morning. White House rejects Seymour Hersh baseless assertions and hyphens on bin Laden raid. Baseless assertions sums to 59, and with S exceptions, that's where S is worth 10 instead of 1, 113. 113 is the number mainstream, the word green screen, the word dishonest. In the Bava Kama, the Jewish holy text, is Rule 113a that says a Jew can lie to a Gentile. Who runs the media? Jews. Who do they lie to? Mostly non-Jews. But they lie to their own too. They're really Zionist Jews. Orthodox Jews, I'm not talking about them. They're excused from my rants. So we get this 113 coding. And the story's been tied to Lewis Carroll. Let's take a peek at Lewis Carroll real quick. Lewis Carroll, the pen name, died January 14th, 1898, just 13 days shy of being 66 years old. The numerology of this date has connections to 131, 32, and 113. What's interesting about 131 is that today, May 11th, is the 131st day of the year. And again, his death has a connection to the number 113. He's being incorporated into this story that the same numbers are being put on. So that's the reason he used the name Lewis Carroll. He could have gone to other fictional writers, but he used Lewis Carroll for a specific reason. Why? Because these people are all Zionist agents abiding by this numerological gematria conspiracy. Very real and very well documented on my blog and my video blog. Hope you're still following. With regards to Seymour Myron Hersh, his full name, his name has a gematria of 115. Again, today is May 11th. Some people write that day, the day first, 11/5. A lot like the name Seymour Myron Hersh, who's making the headlines today for the first time in a long time. I don't know if he's been in the news since 1968 when he broke the story of the My Lai massacre, which, in hindsight, is probably just more bullshit. You know, a lot of things went down in the year 68. That story was likely to create public persuasion to help wrap up the war that went along their numerological timeline, as all wars have. Vietnam unnecessary, and everything after September 11th in terms of war completely unnecessary. All based on lies. The Secretary of Defense during Vietnam was Robert McNamara. Just before his death, he admitted that the whole thing, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which started the war, was based on a lie, based on something that never happened. Think about that. Our country started a war on something that never happened but was widely publicized. And still, most Americans do not know that today, just like how on the date of September 11th, Building 7 fell, and 90% of the country still doesn't know about it. Why don't they know about it? Because if they did, they would start to question the official story. Buildings just can't fall out of nowhere. That building fell 8 hours later in the day, just like buildings 1 and 2. It's the building where Rudy Giuliani spent billions of dollars building an underground bunker beneath. It's the building that was holding all the case files for the federal cases against Enron, WorldCom, and all the companies that were busted around that time. September 11th was like killing 100 birds with one stone. The day before September 11th, Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense at that time, said the United States couldn't account for more than $2 trillion in military spending out of the Pentagon for the years 99 and 2000. They lost more than $1 trillion in each of those years. If you made $1 a second, truth seeker, you would have to live for 32,000 years. Yes, 32,000 years, making $1 per second every second of your life to make $1 trillion. 32,000 years, $1 a second. That's what $1 trillion is. Get saving. Your government lost that in 2 years. They told you when? The day before September 11th. That was the front page story on the New York Times the day of September 11th. Talk about lost headlines. So Seymour Hersh, Lewis Carroll, the numerology ties in with this hoax of a story. I need to do some more work on Lewis Carroll. Anyhow, in the reporting, they've gone to Peter Bergen, someone that I've been calling out for the entire time I've been doing this blog. Bergen's a 33 name. He's the person that's been feeding us the story about Osama bin Laden since the beginning. This is the man that interviewed bin Laden 3 months before September 11th for CNN. This guy interviewed Osama bin Laden June 2001 when he was the most wanted man by the FBI. So who is Peter Bergen? Isn't he a traitor to his nation? He had Osama bin Laden right there and he just did an interview. It's all a big joke, truth seeker. These people are the biggest scum among us. I don't give a fuck about Osama bin Laden, but I'd love to see a Peter Bergen so I could kick his teeth in. And if you don't feel the same way, you're an idiot. The liars on the TV are the biggest terrorists in this nation. Peter Bergen's been feeding us stories like this all this time, Truth Seeker. ISIS Endgame, Apocalypse. Did you know it's been Peter Bergen that's been doing all the ISIS stories all this time? Peter Bergen. 86 life number. Like triangle, like pyramid. The symbol of the Illuminati. He's been giving us all the beheading stories. The name of the beetle. All this coded crap with the same numerology. Remember this story from March 11th, 311? We got to look at Osama bin Laden's rare cave hideout. Look at these images. What looks real about this to you? Notice how they put a gun in his hand in each image. Osama bin Laden never goes anywhere without his AK-47. With regards to 47, Truth Seeker, if you don't know this already, if you're new to my work, the name Osama bin Laden equals 47 the small way, 110 the big way. Why is that significant? Building 7 was 47 floors tall. Buildings 1 and 2 were 110 stories tall. Building 7, each floor was 47,000 square feet. True facts, Truth Seeker. Look them up if you don't believe me. Osama bin Laden with his trusty AK-47 next to his bookshelf, so well organized in his cave. Look at this crap, Truth Seeker. The guys who built this are the same guys who took the World Trade Centers down. Only idiots would believe this. Only idiots. Oh, God. And again, this morning, Seymour Hersh is saying that bin Laden story is bullshit. Here's a story from the past from Peter Bergen, again reminding us how we really found Osama bin Laden. So, of course, Peter Bergen's going to take the biggest issue with this made-for-television story. All right. Let's watch the mainstream news coverage.
Bin Laden's stay in Abbottabad, which makes no sense at all. After all, bin Laden's principal goal is the overthrow of the Saudi regime. They revoked his citizenship.
Morning. Peter, you wrote the book on bin Laden. Did the president lie?
I mean, the short answer is there's no evidence for that at all.
And they're asking again, did he lie about the original assassination story of bin Laden? That's what the question was in regards to.
Seymour Hersh has had a distinguished career as an investigative journalist, but I think he misfired with this one. A number of the claims he makes in this piece just defy common sense and the evidence that we know. For instance, he says that it was because the U.S. and Pakistan were collaborating on the hunt for bin Laden, and they all knew that he was in this compound in Abbottabad in northern Pakistan, that there was no firefight. The SEALs just walked in and shot bin Laden. Well, I was in the compound and I saw evidence of considerable number of bullets that were exchanged. We know from 2 of the SEALs on the raid who publicly said that other people were killed that night. Other shots were fired. We know from multiple U.S. officials that 4 other adults in the compound were killed. And that's just one example of where the reporting just doesn't make sense. Another, Carol, is he says that Saudi Arabia was financing bin Laden's stay in Abbottabad, which makes no sense at all. After all, bin Laden's principal goal is the overthrow of the Saudi regime. They revoked his citizenship in 1994. He's their mortal enemy. And the idea that somehow they'd be subsidizing his stay in the compound, none of this really adds up. Not to say that there might not be something in the 10,000-word article that's true, but as far as I can tell, what's true isn't new, and what's new isn't.
I just have to pause here, because I can only listen to this guy speak for so long. You have to understand that what you're looking at is one of the biggest pieces of fucking filth on this planet. This guy is a real piece of shit, Truth Seeker. You know? It makes me mad that this guy's still alive. As a people, we need to become organized. I hate nonviolence. Nonviolence hasn't done shit for this world. What we need is strategic, organized violence. These news anchors, these liars, these networks, as a people, if we became organized, we could take them out of power. We have to do that. As long as this is on the airwaves programming people, we are fucked. The only solution is to tear this down. Nonviolence, waiting for Jesus, thinking the end is any day, that's all part of the lie that's been sold to you like bin Laden. That's what the masses want. Sheepish people, people who are waiting for something. The only thing to do is take action. That needs to get in the consciousness. There are no heroes coming. If you're waiting for your hero, you might be listening to it. You know, I used to be waiting for the hero. Then one day I woke up and I said, you know what? I seem to know more than almost anybody else I hear in this world speak. A lot of you are that same way. We are the heroes. We need to tear assholes like this down. Let's form a critical mass. I'll be the first one at CNN studios in Georgia. Let's go.
True.
You don't sound like you think much of this article at all, Peter.
Well,
And look at these fucking anchors. Look at this dumb bitch. You know, probably on her screen she has a thing that says make a face. Because that's what resonates with the idiot audience. Ooh, yeah, her face tells the whole story.
I'm somebody who's admired Cy Hersh, and he broke the My Lai story. He broke the Abu Ghraib story along with 60 Minutes.
And this fucking piece of shit keeps referring to him as Cy Hersh. Cy Hersh has a gematria of 39, also 48. Cy Hersh is born on 4/8, April 8th. The word hoax equals 48. But without the S exception, it sums to 39. 39 is the flip of 93, the number of Saturn. Also directly connected to this Saturn worship. Very much connected to New York where the whole thing went down. So he's referring to him as Cy Hersh because it's part of this numerological shit that we're being bombarded with every day. Here we go.
He's had a distinguished career, but this is based really on one source. And literally hundreds of people in Pakistan and the U.S. government would have to be lying for years and years about this issue.
And see how he just introduces that? That's the kind of thing that sticks in so many people's heads, such as my parents. My dad goes, well, hundreds of people couldn't cover up a lie. So many people make those kind of remarks. Bullshit, they can't. If they are part of an agenda, if they're being paid, if they believe in the mission, then surely they can participate in the lie. You know, they introduce the truth, but then they say, oh, see, it couldn't be that way. It's because dumb people can't think, truth seeker.
And, we live in an open society, and when there is a conspiracy like Watergate, people start talking about it. Not just one person, but
and with regards to Watergate, do you know why all that happened? It's another one of these false, manipulated stories to make people think that justice is upheld when people in high places do wrong. That happened in the year 74, the year of the martyr. All part of the hoax, truth seeker. Think about all the dishonesty in high places since that hasn't been held accountable for. This guy has to go all the way back to Watergate before my lifetime.
Number of people. So it fails a lot of common sense tests.
You also did your homework on this one. You actually contacted Hersh's main Pakistani source. He's a retired general. His name is Assad Durrani. What did he tell you?
Well, Assad Durrani was head of the Pakistani military intelligence agency in the early 90s, so that's 2 decades ago. So it's not like he's super current on the Bin Laden raid. But what he told me is that there was no evidence of the assertion that the Pakistanis knew that that ISI knew that Bin Laden was in Abbottabad. But he said, he said plausibly it could be so. But there's a big difference between plausibility and evidence. And so simply having somebody say, hey, it's plausible, I mean, anything's plausible. But as historians and journalists, we try and traffic in what is true, what is provable or disprovable.
All right, let's let it go to the next story so we can hear from Seymour Hersh. Oh, God, they got to give us a commercial. Check something out here real quick, Truth Seeker. From this article, they gave us this video that's a minute 42 in length, Truth Seeker. I just want to point out that the word terrorist equals 142. And they named President Obama also equals 142. And think about Obama. His name is Barack Hussein Obama. And what did they do to us on 9/11? They confused us with the names Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein as in regards to who was responsible for the World Trade Center attacks. Still today, they say 20% of the country thinks Saddam Hussein was responsible for September 11th. Just think about that. That is astounding. Somebody who had nothing to do with it, a fifth of the country still thinks Saddam Hussein is who's responsible for September 11th. And then we get a president named Barack Hussein Obama. I mean, I don't know how anybody couldn't see what a setup the whole thing is. The whole country is a military psyop meant to fuck with everyone's head, and it runs on. The only reason it runs is because the people are so stupid they can't see through it. You know, it's a real tragedy. And here's another asshole on the news, Chris Cuomo, CC33. His now dead relative was former, is it governor of New York or mayor of New York City? I can't think. But either way, the members of the gang, they're all over. They're all coded. Peter Bergen to Chris Cuomo. Let's move on.
Question now is, was President Obama's account of the raid that killed bin Laden a lie? That is the claim in a stunning new article by noted investigative journalist Seymour Hersh. He joins us now to defend the reporting. Mr. Hersh, thank you for joining us on New Day.
Okay.
The basic headline here is Pakistan knew where he was. They were keeping him there, and one of their own turned him over essentially to the U.S. Why do you believe that story, especially leaning so heavily on just one anonymous source?
Well, I don't think that's correct to say one anonymous source. The story says clearly that I was able to vet and verify information with others in the community. You know, it's very tough for guys still inside to get quoted extensively. And there are other people who America uses an awful lot of retired CIA people, military people in the war on terror. And there are other people who have retired with great information, so it's much easier to quote some of them than somebody on active duty. But the story makes it clear I vetted most and verified. You know, I've been around a long time, long of tooth in this business, and I understand the consequences of saying what I'm saying.
But a lot of the detail that you have in the piece, some 10,000 words, does come from this unnamed source, and that's why it's drawing some fire. But, you know, if you just get into the particulars of it, what is the main reason why this would be a lie? Why would it be covered up if it was really just a cooperative agreement with Pakistan? Where's the motive?
Well, no, the motive is very simple. The idea, of course, was that we did have a walk-in. That's what the CIA calls somebody who comes in and sort of, you could argue, betrays his company or his country for money. He took most of the $25 million, at least 20 of it. Well, that was the offer we had on the table for information leading to the whereabouts of bin Laden that had been going on. We had that offer outstanding since 2002. So some guy walks in and he's basically involved in the protection of bin Laden on behalf of the Pakistani intelligence service, and we start from there.
But how do you think, Mr. Hersh, how do you think a guy walks into the Islamabad embassy when you know how, or certainly this person would know, how closely watched it is by Pakistani authorities? How would someone just walk in and give this kind of information?
Well, I don't know the details of how we walked in.
Matters.
It's not very, well, of course it does, but it's not very, I can tell you right now, he talked to the station chief, a man named Jonathan Bank, a very competent officer. And the CIA and the government did what you do in a case like this. You make sure you give this guy a polygraph test. A team came out from Washington to do so, and they vet, always worry about a walk-in. That a lot of them have a lot of reasons that aren't particularly reliable or very tasteful. So they worked them to the bone. And then we began to do the issue. We realized the president was asking a lot of very good questions. Is this, how do we know it's really bin Laden, et cetera? And we realized we had to go and talk to the Pakistanis who were keeping him. And the head of the Pakistani military, a guy named General Kiani and a guy named General Pasa, eventually agreed to cooperate with us. They didn't have much choice. We can cut off our supply of arms and money under the table to the generals. And we did so. We put a lot of pressure on them, and they worked with us. Of course they worked with us. The alternative is you want to believe what I call a Lewis Carroll fairy tale, that bin Laden, who the most
Again, remember how Lewis Carroll ties into this whole ordeal being today, as well as the name Seymour Hersh.
man since 2002 in the world, decided the one safe place to live is in a compound 40 miles from the main capital of Pakistan.
That's the point of intrigue that has always been a point of skepticism, is that we all thought he was hiding in some honeycomb cave somewhere, and it turns out that he was right down the street from the equivalent of their West Point. But, with that as a starting point,
it's a pretty good starting point.
The idea, though, but, obviously, look, I don't mean to tell you the trade. You've been doing it at such a high level for such a long time. But the idea that we were working with them, and then after, as soon as it comes out, the Pakistani government condemns us unconditionally for doing it. I mean, it just doesn't seem that they were owning their own narrative. Why wouldn't Pakistan come out and say, we gave you this guy, we helped you?
Well, the idea was, the understanding was, first of all, Bin Laden's very popular inside Pakistan. A majority of the unwashed, of the people there, most of the public, really respected and liked Bin Laden, especially for sticking in the eye of America. We're not very popular in Pakistan. Things are a little better now, but for many years we were very, very low in the totem pole in terms of respect. The idea was that we were going to go into, if you have to think about this, a team of SEALs, and our SEALs are the best there is, there's no question. 24, 25 guys go in to the middle of Pakistan, take out a guy with no air cover, no protection, no security, no trouble. Are you kidding me? What happened was, the deal was we weren't going to announce it. They were going to take him out. They had to kill him. That was the agreement. There's no question this was an assassination from the get-go, despite what the White House says. They had to kill him, and they had to bring him out, the body out, and then we were going to announce it. The initial plan was, the plan that everybody agreed to, it would be announced 7 to 10 days later as the result. We did a drone hit in the Hindu Kush Mountains that separate Pakistan and Afghanistan, and my God, we took a look. There was a tall guy, and it turned out to be Bin Laden. We did a DNA test, and the president was going to announce it a week later. Everybody in Pakistan is protected. The generals
So
who
what
helped
happened?
us are protected. What happened is the president decided that night to go public.
But then,
On the
look, I
night
mean,
of the
then
raid.
so he just double crosses the people who had handed him something, especially this president who has gone
Well,
bent over
double-
backwards to be nice to Pakistan. And on the SEAL side, you have that they were training for a raid that you say they didn't need to do. Why were they training so hard? You have it in Utah, but it was supposedly in Nevada. And then you have the SEALs telling such a different account. They would all have to be lying for what you're saying to be true. And we had our Peter Bergen, as you probably know, who went to the
Listen to how he says it, like it would be any kind of surprise. They'd all have to be lying for it to be what you're saying true. Man, that's all we get on TV are lies, lies, lies. That's what's so annoying about this, and that's how you can tell it's just controlled opposition. I mean, if Seymour Hersh was really interested in the truth of the matter, you think he'd be doing some more hard-hitting articles on 9/11, the existence of Bin Laden himself. This is all just part of the bullshit narrative we're fed. It just casts some doubt and speculation in some people's minds. It'll be another thing to argue and bicker over at the water tank for most people. Meanwhile, the real truth of the matter is completely ignored.
compound in Abbottabad before they destroyed it. And he said the place was riddled with bullets and was obviously the scene of a firefight, not to mention that we lost a bird in the helicopter going down. All of that would have to be untrue, other than the helicopter going down, for your account to be true. Why put so much stock in it?
Well, because I did an awful lot of work. I talked to a lot of Pakistanis. I quote by name. One of the things that made the story doable now, where before it wouldn't have been, was the fact that a former retired head of the Pakistani
Durrani.
intelligence service, General Assad Durrani, basically said to me, look, you got the story. We all know this is true. We've all known this is true for a long time. He's talking about the insiders.
But he didn't say that to Bergen. When Bergen contacted him, he said, look, I don't know the facts,
Now we're bringing up Bergen, the 33 agent, the worst of them all.
but it is plausible. I mean, that's not exactly an
That's not what
endorsement.
he said. That's not what he said in the magazine.
We have a
article.
graphic. Just put up what we're saying that the reporting is there, so we can have it. When I emailed Durrani, this is from Peter Bergen, obviously, after the Hersh piece appeared, Durrani said there was no evidence of any kind that the ISI knew that Bin Laden was hiding in Abbottabad, but he could still make an assessment that this could be plausible. It's exactly what I said it was. So that's what Durrani said.
That's not what he said in the article, and that's not what we said in many exchanges by phone, by email. The sentences that appeared in the article that are very definitive, that he understood there was a walk-in. Of course, everybody knew that's what happened. In the Pakistani side, I also quoted somebody I could not name in the Pakistani who's very knowledgeable about Pakistan, saying the same thing. Look, I'm sorry, it goes against the grain. I've been doing this all my life, and all I can tell you is I understand the consequences. I've been a reporter, as you know, for 50 years in this town. Had a lot of good stories. And a lot of stories.
But not everything turns out the way you think it's going to turn out also, even in your own career. I mean, that's part of the vagaries of the business. But, something...
I would argue that a lot of the stories I wrote were pretty much on mark. I'm not going to... Nobody's perfect, of course. Everybody's done bad stories.
But it's about which stories you decide to go out on a limb for. And on this
I'm not on a limb on this. That's just your definition.
That's what the media always does at the end of every story with any guest that's bringing up questions to a mainstream narrative. Always tries to discredit cast doubt. Old game that only idiots can't see through. Again, the reason this guy's in the media, though, is because he is one of their agents. He went to school in Chicago. That tells me everything, Truth Seeker. He's got one of these wives with a 33 name. He has all the signs of the people in the gang. He's also currently 78 years old. We haven't heard from him in a while. That's the speed that a record spins at. Revolutions per minute, 78. And these nonsensical stories are like a broken record. Also, again, today's May 11th. His name has the 115 connection. I should have noted that Seymour Hersh also sums to 66, another number of much importance. Remember, Lewis Carroll died just days before turning 66, and he was also referenced in this story. All part of the numerological conspiracy that these people abide by. Lewis Carroll. Gonna have to do some more work on him too. So I think I got it all in there, Truth Seeker. Hopefully I communicated that clearly enough. But the reason we're getting this story today is, again, because it's all by the numbers. All right, until next